Stop. Listen. Pay attention. Chosen one. This is not background noise, and it is not arriving by accident. It is reaching you now because something in your life has reached a threshold. You have felt it. The quiet pressure that has followed you through ordinary moments. The fatigue that does not match the effort you are making. The sense that you have been carrying more weight than your situation seems to justify. You have been functional, but stretched. Present, but inwardly alert. You have gone through your days without collapsing, yet something inside you has been paying close attention. That is not weakness. It is not overthinking. It is not imagination. It is awareness responding to a real condition. There has been a narrowing around you. Not dramatic, not visible, but specific. You may have noticed it as sudden tiredness, a subtle hesitation before decisions that used to feel easy, or a quiet isolation even while surrounded by people. You did not panic. You did not spiral. You kept moving. And that detail matters more than you realize. This message is not here to alarm you. It is here to give shape to something you already sensed, but could not fully explain. You have been navigating pressure without naming it. You have been stabilizing yourself without announcing it. And because you did not react loudly, it may have felt like nothing significant happened. But something did happen. What you walked through recently was not random timing. It was not simply a difficult week or a passing mood. There was coordination in the way events clustered, in the way your energy was tested, in the way your attention was pulled. And yet you remained intact. You adjusted without breaking. You moved through without being trapped. This is intentional communication. It is not general. It is not meant to fit everyone who hears it. It is calibrated to your experience, your rhythm, your way of holding yourself together under strain. You are not being singled out for danger. You are being acknowledged for stability. Clarity is coming, but not all at once. You do not need a dramatic reveal to understand what occurred. You need recognition. You need language for the moment you pass through without fully realizing it was designed to catch you. You did not stumble into safety by chance. You walked out of something structured to interrupt you. And the fact that you are here steady enough to listen is the first confirmation that whatever was set in motion did not land where it was intended to. Stay with this. Let it settle. The understanding will meet you where you are already standing. This message is not for everyone who hears it. It is for you specifically, and that distinction matters. Chosen one, the reason this resonates without needing persuasion is because it aligns with what you already lived. You are not being invited into an identity. You are being named within an experience that already occurred. Something involved you directly, not symbolically, not hypothetically. You were already in motion when the pressure formed. There is a difference between people who struggle loudly and people who stabilize quietly. You belong to the second category, not because life has been easier for you, but because your system responds differently under strain. When pressure increased, you did not amplify it with fear. When uncertainty appeared, you did not abandon yourself. You stayed oriented, even if you could not explain why. This is how you can tell this message is for you. You did not need motivation to survive what happened. You needed composure, and you had it without effort. That kind of steadiness does not come from conscious effort alone. It comes from internal structure that has already been formed. Others in similar conditions would have reacted visibly. They would have spiraled into doubt over analysis or emotional collapse. You did not. You felt the weight, but you did not hand it control. You continued to function, to decide to move forward, even while something in the background tested your balance. This does not mean you were unaware. It means your awareness did not turn against you. You did not dramatize the tension. You regulated it. That distinction is subtle, but it is decisive. It tells us that your strength is not something you switch on in emergencies. It is something that exists underneath your conscious effort. You may have questioned yourself afterward, wondered why you felt drained without a clear reason, wondered why you felt watched or evaluated without anyone visibly doing so. Those questions did not destabilize you. They passed through without attaching. That is another confirmation. This identity is not about elevation or special status. It is about function. You are someone who remains coherent when circumstances attempt to fragment attention and energy. You do not need to announce resilience for it to operate. It is automatic. That is why this message does not need to convince you. It only needs to clarify. What you walked through was real. Your response was specific. And the fact that you remained intact without conscious defense, tells us exactly who this is for. You are not here because you are searching for meaning. You are here because meaning has already brushed against you, and now it is being articulated. There is one symptom you recognized immediately, even if you did not name it at the time. It was not dramatic. It did not stop your life. It showed up as a subtle but persistent drain, a feeling that your energy was being taxed without a visible cause. You may have noticed that rest did not fully restore you. Sleep helped, but it did not reset everything. Quiet moments gave relief but not resolution. This led you to question yourself briefly. Was it stress? Was it mental fatigue? Was it something you missed? Those questions did not spiral, but they lingered just long enough to be uncomfortable. This is where clarity matters. What you felt was not a flaw in your system. It was a signal from it. When pressure builds in a coordinated way, the first thing it touches is regulation. Not emotion, not thought. Regulation. Your body and attention were asked to adapt quickly, repeatedly, and without warning. That creates a specific sensation. Not panic, but depletion. Not confusion, but alert tiredness. You did not lose focus. You redistributed it. Many people misinterpret this experience and turn on themselves. They assume they are failing, becoming less capable, or losing momentum. You did not do that. Even if the thought crossed your mind, you did not attach to it. That restraint is important. It shows you trusted your internal readout more than surface discomfort. The sensation itself was information. It was your system telling you that something external was pressing inward, testing limits without crossing obvious lines. This kind of pressure does not announce itself. It relies on accumulation. Small demands, slight delays, minor disruptions. None severe enough alone, but deliberate in sequence. Your response was adjustment, not alarm. You slowed certain decisions without freezing. You conserved energy without withdrawing. You stayed observant without becoming suspicious. That balance is rare, and it only appears in people who have already learned how to move through transition without losing coherence. This reframing matters because it removes self-judgment. You were not weak. You were responding appropriately to an environment that required higher regulation. The fatigue was not a personal shortcoming. It was the cost of staying aligned while something attempted to pull you off center. Once you understand this, the confusion dissolves. You no longer need to wonder why that period felt heavier than it looked. You no longer need to replay moments searching for a mistake. There was no mistake. There was a signal, and you read it correctly. This prepares you for what comes next, because understanding the symptom changes how you interpret the pressure itself. You stop asking what is wrong with you, and start recognizing what was happening around you. And when that shift occurs, something else becomes clear. You were not overwhelmed because the pressure never reached its intended depth. It met resistance before it met reaction. That is not because you fought it. It is because your system recognized it early and adapted quietly. What you encountered was not imagined, and it was not vague. There was an invisible layer of pressure moving around you, not to frighten you, but to interfere with your timing and clarity. It did not arrive loudly. It arrived organized. This kind of pressure does not announce itself with chaos. It works through precision, through moments that feel slightly off, through sequences that seem inconvenient but not disastrous, through interruptions that test patience more than courage. And recently those moments clustered closer together than usual. The timing matters. This was not a long, drawn-out season. It was recent, concentrated, coordinated within a narrow window. You may have noticed that several unrelated things required your attention at once. Not enough to overwhelm you, but enough to divide focus. That was not accidental. What is important here is not the presence of pressure, but your condition under it. You remained functional. You showed up. You made decisions. You kept your routines intact, even when your internal state was being subtly taxed. There was no visible collapse, no dramatic withdrawal, no loss of orientation. That is the reveal. Pressure like this is designed to trigger reaction, to provoke impulsive choices, emotional leakage, or disengagement. It expects the system to expose itself under strain. Yours did not. It adjusted without signaling distress. You did not become reckless. You did not become rigid. You became precise. That tells us the pressure met something it could not easily penetrate. Not resistance in the form of force, but resistance in the form of coherence. You stayed aligned with yourself. Your responses remained proportionate. Your attention did not scatter. Even when there was momentary confusion, it did not take control. Even when there was fatigue, it did not dictate your behavior. You felt the weight, but you did not hand it authority. This is why it is accurate to say you walked out rather than escaped. There was no chase, no sudden turn, no dramatic exit. You continued forward, and the pressure failed to anchor itself. It could not gain leverage. What makes this significant is that you did not need to know what was happening in order to respond correctly. Your system did it automatically. That only happens when someone has already developed internal stability before the confrontation arrives. Many people only discover their limits when pressure exposes them. Yours revealed your structure instead. It showed that your baseline is steadier than the environment anticipated. There is no need to personify this pressure or dramatize it. It is enough to recognize that it was intentional, timed, and structured. And it is enough to recognize that it did not achieve its purpose. You remained yourself throughout. That is the key detail. As this becomes clear, you can begin to see why certain sensations appeared when they did, why certain moments felt dense without explanation, and why, despite all of it, you are still standing in the same direction you were before. The pressure passed through your field, tested for openings, and moved on. Not because it was fought, because it found none. To understand why that pressure failed to take hold, you need to look at how it attempted to enter. Not as a single force, but as several quiet points of contact. None extreme on their own, all familiar to human experience. And each one met a kind of internal steadiness that did not announce itself. The first point was doubt, not the loud kind that questions your entire life, but the subtle kind that asks whether your timing is off, whether you should hesitate, whether a decision you already made needs to be reconsidered without new information. This form of doubt aims to slow momentum. You noticed it. You felt the pause, but you did not dismantle your direction. You reviewed calmly and moved forward without urgency or retreat. The second point was fear, but not panic. It showed up as anticipation, a sense that something might go wrong if you were not careful enough. This kind of fear tries to make you overcorrect, to tighten unnecessarily. You did not. You stayed attentive without becoming rigid. You respected the signal without letting it shrink your range of motion. The third point was energy drain. This was the most noticeable. Tasks that usually felt neutral required more effort. Conversations carried more weight. Silence felt necessary rather than optional. This is where many people begin to disengage or self-criticize. You did neither. You adjusted pace. You conserved without collapsing. You allowed yourself to move slower without interpreting it as failure. The fourth point was isolation. Not abandonment, but a sense of being slightly out of sync with others. You may have felt that people did not fully track what you were carrying, that sharing would require more explanation than you wanted to give. Instead of forcing connection or withdrawing completely, you stayed selective. You remained present without oversharing. That preserved your energy and clarity. The fifth point was delay. Things did not break. They simply did not move as quickly as expected. Responses took longer. Progress stalled briefly. This is designed to provoke frustration or impulsive change. You did not rush. You did not abandon what mattered. You allowed timing to stretch without losing trust in your direction. Each of these points mirrors common psychological experiences. That is why they are effective. They feel ordinary. They feel personal. But taken together in close succession, they form a pattern. What matters is how you moved through all of them, without fragmentation. You did not become cynical when doubt appeared. You did not become controlling when fear brushed past. You did not become self-critical when energy dipped. You did not become withdrawn when isolation surfaced. You did not become impatient when delay tested you. That consistency is not accidental. It reveals internal regulation that does not depend on ideal conditions. You were not fighting each point. You were absorbing them, redistributing impact, and continuing forward. This is the difference between resilience as effort and resilience as structure. Effort strains, structure holds. You did not need to tell yourself to be strong. You did not need affirmations or urgency. Your system already knew how to remain upright under shifting weight. That is why nothing escalated. Pressure looks for amplification. It relies on reaction to grow. Without reaction, it remains contained. You may now see that what felt like a challenging stretch was actually a demonstration of stability, not because you enjoyed it, not because it was easy, but because you stayed internally aligned while external variables shifted. This is why the pressure points did not compound into collapse. They arrived, they tested, they passed. And the fact that you can now recognize them without emotional charge is further confirmation. You are not replaying them to prove anything. You are observing them because your system is no longer under load. This section matters because it shows you something precise. You did not survive by chance. You did not remain steady by avoidance. You remained steady because your internal organization was already stronger than the conditions it encountered. That is what allowed you to walk through the entire sequence without losing yourself, your direction, or your coherence. Now comes the part where understanding settles in, not as emotion, but as evaluation. When you look back at that period with a clearer lens, you can see that it does not fit the category of coincidence. The pattern was too specific, the timing too precise, the way pressure touched multiple areas of your life without overwhelming any single one points to structure rather than randomness. This is where many people reach for explanations that dismiss their own experience. They call it bad luck, a rough patch, an off week. You may have been tempted to do the same, but something in you resisted minimizing it. Not because you needed it to mean more, but because your internal data did not support a shallow explanation. You did not fall apart. You did not lose continuity. Your thinking stayed coherent. Your behavior stayed consistent with your values. Even under strain, you remained recognizable to yourself. That alone removes the idea that you were simply reacting to stress. What actually occurred was a test of internal alignment. Not a test you volunteered for, not a challenge you sought out. It arrived applied pressure and observed response. And the response was quiet regulation. You did not become impulsive. You did not make decisions you later had to undo. You did not leak frustration onto people who did not deserve it. You maintained proportion. That is not luck. That is internal resilience, expressing itself without fanfare. When pressure meets someone unprepared, it creates noise, mental loops, emotional spikes, erratic behavior. When pressure meets coherence, it reveals calm efficiency. That is what you demonstrated. It is also important to note what did not happen. You did not need external validation to stabilize. You did not seek rescue. You did not require explanation in real time. You trusted your own internal orientation enough to let clarity arrive later. That detail matters. It shows you were not scrambling for meaning. You were allowing understanding to catch up to experience. That is a sign of maturity. As you review it now, you can acknowledge that there was nothing mystical or dramatic about how you handled it. There was no adrenaline, no heroic effort, just steadiness. That makes it more credible, not less. This is the confirmation phase, where you stop asking whether something happened and start recognizing what kind of system you are operating with. One that does not fracture under moderate pressure. One that adapts without losing identity. One that remains internally consistent even when external variables shift. You do not need to inflate this moment. You also do not need to dismiss it. You can simply name it accurately. You encountered structured pressure. You remained regulated. The pressure did not achieve its purpose. That realization does not change who you are. It clarifies it. And once that clarity settles, something else becomes evident. What you demonstrated is not common, even though it looks ordinary on the surface. That observation is not about comparison or elevation. It is about context. And it sets the stage for understanding how rare this kind of stability actually is under similar conditions. You are not different because you endured more. You are different because you stayed present and functional, while many would have lost internal balance far earlier. That is the quiet confirmation, and it holds without needing anything added to it. When you place your experience alongside common human reactions, the contrast becomes clearer without needing exaggeration. Most people do not require extreme pressure to lose internal balance. A single unresolved delay, a subtle doubt left unanswered, or a brief period of low energy is often enough to trigger visible reaction. Attention scatters, emotions spike. Decisions become reactive rather than measured. Presence fades. You did not follow that pattern. Under comparable conditions, many would have withdrawn, overcompensated, or externalized the tension. Some would have become restless, constantly seeking distraction. Others would have become rigid, trying to control every variable. Still others would have collapsed inward, disengaging emotionally, while remaining physically present. You stayed present in a different way. You continued to show up to your responsibilities without abandoning yourself. You remained responsive without becoming overextended. You noticed internal signals without allowing them to hijack behavior. That combination is uncommon, not because others are weak, but because it requires an internal structure that most people have not had reason or opportunity to develop. This is not about superiority. It is about preparedness. Many people rely on external stability to remain regulated. When circumstances are smooth, they function well. When variables shift, their regulation collapses. You demonstrated regulation that did not depend on favorable conditions. That places you in a smaller category of individuals who remain internally consistent under moderate disruption. You did not need reassurance to keep moving. You did not need constant explanation to stay oriented. You tolerated uncertainty without rushing to resolve it prematurely. That alone sets you apart in a world that often demands immediate clarity to feel safe. What makes this rare is not intensity, but restraint. You resisted the urge to dramatize what you felt. You did not inflate the experience to make sense of it. You allowed it to pass through observation rather than reaction. That is a skill most people do not realize they lack until pressure exposes it. Again, this is not an elevation. It is a recognition of function. Just as some people have physical balance that allows them to move steadily on uneven ground, you have internal balance that allows you to stay coherent when circumstances shift. This comparison matters because it reframes your experience accurately. You were not unaffected. You were regulated. You did not avoid pressure. You metabolized it. And while many would have needed intervention, reassurance, or escape to recover, you returned to baseline quietly. That is not common. It is simply true. This rarity does not demand attention. It does not need affirmation. It only needs to be understood so you stop mislabeling your steadiness as neutrality or emotional distance. You were engaged. You were present. You were functioning at a level that most people only discover they need after they have already lost it. That is the context. And with that context established, it becomes possible to clarify something important about your identity. Not as a role you perform, but as a baseline you live from. What needs to be clarified now is subtle but essential. Your steadiness was not something that switched on in response to pressure. It was already there before anything arrived. This is not about activation. It is about baseline. You did not rise to the occasion. You met it at ground level. The composure you showed was not effortful or heroic. It was familiar to your system because it is how you are already organized internally. Pressure did not create your strength. It revealed it. This distinction matters because many people misunderstand themselves. They believe they are strong only when they are tested. In reality, strength that only appears under stress is unstable. What you demonstrated was something different. Your inner structure did not need to rearrange itself to cope. It simply held. That tells us your preparation happened long before this moment. Through experiences that required you to stay present when it would have been easier to disconnect. Through situations that taught you to regulate emotion without suppressing it. Through repetition of choosing coherence over reaction. None of that required recognition at the time. It was quiet work, internal work. And because it did not look dramatic, it may not have felt significant while it was forming. But now you can see the result. Your maturity is not about age or knowledge. It is about integration. Thought, emotion, and behavior remain aligned even when external signals attempt to pull them apart. That alignment is not accidental. It is built. There is no need to frame this in supernatural terms. Inner structure is enough. Your nervous system knows how to return to balance. Your attention knows how to stay anchored. Your identity does not dissolve under uncertainty. That is why you did not need to label what was happening in real time. Your system handled it before your mind caught up. That is a sign of coherence, not avoidance. This identity does not require maintenance through vigilance. You do not need to watch for threats or anticipate disruption. You only need to continue living from the structure that already exists. Rest when needed. Adjust when appropriate. Trust the signals without dramatizing them. You are not someone who survives by constant effort. You are someone who remains stable because stability is already part of your internal design. This clarification is not meant to elevate you above others. It is meant to anchor you in accuracy. You now understand that what carried you through was not a temporary response, but a foundational quality. And once that is clear, the next step becomes practical rather than analytical. How you live with this awareness matters more than how you interpret the past. That is where integration begins. With that understanding in place, the focus shifts naturally from explanation to orientation. Not urgency, not defense, simply integration. The first perspective is rest, but not collapse. Rest as recalibration. Your system has already shown that it self-regulates under pressure, but regulation still has a cost. You do not need to earn rest or justify it. You allow it because it maintains clarity. Quiet moments are not withdrawal for you, they are alignment. The second perspective is discernment. You do not need to analyze everything that happens around you. You only need to notice what consistently drains energy without offering value. Your awareness is already tuned. Trust it. Discernment for you is subtraction, not vigilance. You simplify rather than guard. The third perspective is boundaries but flexible ones. Not walls, not isolation. Simply choosing where your attention goes. You do not owe immediate access to everyone or everything. Delayed response is not avoidance. It is regulation. You already practice this intuitively. This awareness helps you do it without guilt. The fourth perspective is patience, especially with timing. What did not move during that period was not blocked. It was buffered. Delay does not mean denial. Your experience already proved that forcing momentum is unnecessary. You move when movement is clean. You pause when clarity is still forming. That rhythm works for you. The fifth perspective is focus, not intensity. Focus as coherence. One thing at a time, done without fragmentation. You do not benefit from multitasking under pressure. You benefit from presence. When your attention stays unified, your stability remains intact. The sixth perspective is balance. You do not need to stay alert for pressure returning. Hyper-awareness would destabilize what is already steady. You live forward, not scanning behind you. If something requires adjustment, your system will register it without panic. These perspectives are not instructions. They are acknowledgments of how you already function when you are aligned. Integration simply means honoring that design instead of questioning it. As you do this, emotional closure arrives on its own. You do not need to process the past repeatedly. You do not need to replay what happened. Understanding has already done its work. What remains is a calm confidence that does not announce itself. You move on without residue. You carry the lesson without weight. This is how stability becomes sustainable. Not through control, but through coherence lived daily. And with that, the experience completes its purpose, leaving you oriented, present, and unburdened. Take a moment now and let this settle. You are not standing at the edge of something dangerous. You are standing in clarity. What you walked through has already passed, and it did not leave damage behind. It revealed capacity. It confirmed structure. And now, it releases you back into your life without residue. You do not need to stay alert. You do not need to stay guarded. Nothing is chasing you. Nothing is unfinished. The fact that you can hear this calmly without tension rising in your body is the final confirmation that the moment has closed. Here is the core realization stated gently and simply. You encountered structured pressure. You remained internally coherent. The pressure failed to redirect you, that is all. There is no need to replay it. There is no need to extract more meaning than is necessary. The value was in what it showed you about yourself, not in what it tried to do. Carry this forward as quiet assurance, not as a story you retell. Let it inform how you trust your own stability. Let it soften any lingering self-doubt about how you handle strain. You do not fracture easily. You do not lose yourself under moderate pressure. That is now confirmed. Hold these affirmations briefly without force. You are steady under weight. You remain coherent when conditions shift. You move forward without needing to prove anything. If this message reached you clearly, leave a simple marker in the comments. Write, "I remember." Not for validation. Just as a signal of recognition. If you choose to stay connected, subscribe so you do not miss the next transmission. These messages are designed to meet you where you are, not pull you somewhere else. You are not behind. You are not recovering. You are continuing, and you are doing so from a place that is already stable.